Every single safety system designed to stop what happened in Bhopal was either switched off, under capacity, or under repair, and someone had signed the authorization for each one. Not one of those signatures appeared in the accident report headline. By the time methyl isocyanate began moving through the pipes on the night of December 2, 1984, the plant had already failed, on paper, in memos, in maintenance logs. The disaster the world remembers as a single catastrophic night was actually months in the making. This is Fail Point. Tonight's report, Bhopal, and the paper trail no one stopped. Union Carbide India Limited opened its Bhopal plant in 1969. The original purpose was to mix imported pesticide components. By the late 1970s, that changed. The parent company, Union Carbide Corporation, pushed to manufacture 7, a pesticide, domestically, which meant producing methyl isocyanate, or MIC, on site. MIC is one of the most reactive chemicals in industrial use. It bonds violently with water. It boils at 39 degrees Celsius. At room temperature in an open container, it becomes lethal vapor within seconds. The decision to store it in large bulk tanks, rather than produce it in small batches and use it immediately, was a design choice. That choice had consequences. 3 underground tanks held the plant's MIC supply. Tank 610 was the largest. Each tank was designed with a specific safety architecture: a refrigeration unit to keep MIC below 5 degrees Celsius, cold enough to slow any runaway reaction; a vent gas scrubber to neutralize escaping vapor with caustic soda solution, and a flare tower to burn off any gas the scrubber missed. Think of it as 3 concentric walls around a very dangerous room. If the room caught fire, the first wall contained it. If that failed, the second. If that failed, the third. The designers understood that no single system was enough. The redundancy was the point. By the early 1980s, Bhopal's plant was losing money. The Indian pesticide market had contracted. Production slowed. Staff was cut, from around 850 employees to roughly 600 between 1980 and 1984. Experienced chemical engineers were replaced with workers trained in other disciplines. Some safety positions were left unfilled entirely. Union Carbide's own internal audit in 1982 flagged serious concerns: potential for toxic releases, problems with the MIC storage area, and inadequate staffing. The audit report was sent to plant management in Bhopal. It recommended corrective action. The corrective action was not completed. Production concerns and cost pressures were cited in subsequent internal correspondence. In June 1984, plant management shut down the refrigeration unit connected to the MIC tanks. The stated reason? Cost savings. Refrigerant had been drained from the system and reallocated. The unit would remain offline for the rest of the plant's operational life. This matters precisely because MIC temperature is not just a comfort variable, it is a reaction rate variable. A warmer tank reacts faster if contamination occurs. The engineers who designed the safety architecture had assumed refrigeration would always be running. It was not a backup system, it was the baseline. Removing it did not trigger an alarm. It triggered a memo. The memo was filed. The flare tower, the third line of defense, was taken offline in October 1984 for maintenance. A section of corroded pipe needed replacement. The work was not completed before December. The vent gas scrubber, the second line of defense, was operational but had been placed in standby mode. Its caustic soda circulation pump was running. But investigators later determined the scrubber was operating at well below its rated capacity, insufficient to handle a large volume release. All 3 safety layers were simultaneously degraded, not through accident, not through equipment failure. Through a sequence of documented operational decisions, each signed off individually, none apparently reviewed together as a system. On the night of December 2nd, water entered Tank 610. How the water entered remains officially disputed. Union Carbide's investigation concluded sabotage. A disgruntled employee deliberately introduced water through a specific connection. Indian government investigators and independent analysts concluded it was far more likely the result of routine water washing of nearby pipes, with inadequate isolation of the tank line. The official inquiry never fully settled it. What is not disputed is what happened next. Water reacted with MIC. Temperature inside tank 610 began rising. Pressure built. The tank's relief valve opened. And every system designed to stop what came next was already offline or undersized. The reaction inside tank 610 was self-accelerating. As MIC temperature rose, the reaction rate increased. As the reaction rate increased, temperature rose further. Engineers call this a runaway exothermic reaction, a thermal feedback loop with no natural ceiling. Think of it like a fire that makes its own fuel. Once it crosses a threshold, external intervention becomes nearly impossible without dedicated suppression systems. The refrigeration unit, had it been running, might have slowed the initial temperature rise enough to allow intervention. It was not running. Within roughly an hour of the reaction beginning, an estimated 40 tons of toxic gas had been released into the atmosphere above a city of 900,000 people. The gas moved southwest following the wind. The neighborhoods closest to the plant, Jayaprakash Nagar, Chola Kenchi, Kazi Camp, were densely populated, low-income communities whose residents had no warning and no evacuation plan. Official death toll estimates range widely. The Indian government settled compensation claims based on approximately 15,000 deaths. Independent research groups estimate between 8,000 and 10,000 people died within the first 72 hours. Long-term exposure-related deaths have pushed some estimates past 25,000. Over 500,000 people were exposed. The exact numbers remain contested, a disagreement that carries its own kind of weight. The investigations that followed produced a finding that should have been unremarkable, because it was already documented before the disaster. Every safety system failure identified in the post-accident reports had been flagged in operational records, maintenance logs, and at least one formal audit prior to December 1984. The refrigeration shutdown was in the maintenance ledger. The flare tower outage was in the work order system. The scrubber's operational status was in shift logs. The failures were not hidden. They were visible to anyone reading the right documents in the right room. The question investigators struggled to answer was not what went wrong, but why no one read the documents together. What Bhopal established in engineering practice and chemical industry regulation is a concept now called defense in depth, the requirement that safety layers be evaluated as an integrated system, not as independent checkboxes. A single layer going offline must trigger a review of all other layers. If two layers are simultaneously degraded, production is paused. The logic is simple. Redundancy only works if the redundant systems are actually available. Several countries updated hazardous chemical storage regulations directly in response to Bhopal. The U.S. passed the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act in 1986. The principle it enshrined, that communities near chemical plants have a right to know what is stored and what the risks are, did not exist before December 1984. The plant in Bhopal still stands. Parts of it. Union Carbide was acquired by Dow Chemical in 2001. Dow has maintained it did not inherit liability for the site. The contaminated land has never been fully remediated. Legal proceedings continued for decades. But the engineering record is clear on one point. The failure was not a surprise. It was a convergence of documented, authorized, cost-motivated decisions, each of which degraded the system's ability to survive the next one. The night of December 2nd was not when Bhopal failed. It was when the failure became impossible to ignore. Every failure has a point. Find it before it finds you. Next, the bridge that engineers knew would fall.